Okay, perfect. Well, I appreciate you guys' patience as we waited for everybody to enter the room, so to speak. So again, I just want to acknowledge, thank you guys all for being here. I know things have just been kind of crazy with, school starting, and I feel like there's just a lot of stuff going on. So thank you again for all being here. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is being recorded. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing the address listed. This is just something to read at the beginning of all of our pub meetings for those that are new. This is a statement we came up with: pub belief, values, and anti-racist principles. Pub believes and acts upon anti-racist principles in our meeting spaces and interactions with pub. While every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted toward people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there's a wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. If you have any information, you can see the website. And putting our principles in action. So if you see anything, please speak up and speak out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of the utility board and focus on the impacted individual and just not condemn them. We're just trying to make a good, safe space for people to share out.
Hi, this is
Amy. Is this? Yeah, okay.
I will quickly run through the meeting guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, state the name of the person you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the hosts, so that includes pub staff, Eliza, and myself. Please limit chats to technical and logistical issues. To sign up for public comment, ask for technical assistance, or remind us if you've been waiting to speak. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. Co-hosts may lower your hand once you begin speaking, just to maintain the flow of the conversation. During the public comment periods, public can also raise their hands and you'll be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on for the board, presenters, and facilitators when speaking. If desired, it's not required. Others should leave their videos off. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If you're using a phone, please press *6 to mute or unmute yourself. As mentioned, the public comment will be taken early in the meeting. You can sign up through the chat with pub staff or raise your hand during the comment period. It also will be available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. Again, this meeting is being recorded. Pass it back to you, Kaliska.
Thank you, Amy. I realized I didn't introduce myself. I am Kaliska Day. I'm one of the pub co-chairs. So I apologize for that. Okay, so at this portion, we just have any disclosures of communications. If anybody has any conversations they've had with the bureaus, Water Bureau, outside of this meeting. Alexander, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. This is Alex Lopez. Just wanted to talk about during the disclosure, the organization that I work for is the Portland Harbor Community Coalition, and we are one of the recipients of the city grant for the last cycle. So I will be, just wanted to report that. I actually have a meeting with the city next week with my organization to talk about that grant process, actually. So for the purposes of our conversation about the city grant, I'm going to be kind of stepping back and abstaining from any votes on that. So just wanted to let everyone know that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any disclosures? Not seeing any more hands. Public comment. So this is I don't know, Amy, Eliza, you guys didn't have anybody that signed up before.
No,
I don't have anybody who's signed up.
Okay. So I'm allowed just a couple minutes to see people figure out how to unmute or raise hands. Don't see any public comment. Okay. Okay, so just going to move on to review of our last meeting minutes. Those were sent out as part of a read through beforehand. Let's see, is this just the subcommittee? Is that all we're approving today?
yep,
Okay. So on the subcommittee meeting, it was a meeting with a few pub staff to discuss having a virtual community meeting. So if anybody has any questions about the meeting minutes. Any comments? Okay. And do I ask for a motion to approve on this one, right?
actually, you all have been relatively informal about it, and I think that's okay. If nobody
Okay.
has any corrections, there can be approved as submitted.
Okay. So there's no modifications, and we can just approve it as it's been submitted. Okay, so our first topic, this will be something that we are going to be voting on. So I just want to make everybody aware of that as we continue through this discussion. So I think Alex talked a little bit about his involvement, but the Portland Harbor Grant Committee, they're just here to talk about grants that they're going to council in October. And so we're going to give them the opportunity to kind of update us and talk about that, the grants and sort of what their agenda is for the council meeting. And I'm not sure. Do you know
Amy is
who's
bringing up a presentation, and
okay?
that's what's happening. She had to switch screens.
Okay.
There we go.
Jessica, it looks like.
Yeah, I'm going to kick things off, and then I'll just to provide some programmatic updates and some context and background for folks, and then we'll hand it over to the community panelists to share
Okay,
their
perfect.
feedback. Yeah.
So I'm going to mute myself and let you speak.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Well, thank you all so much for the opportunity to talk with you all today. When the Portland Harbor program was last with you all, we mentioned that we were going to be coming back and sharing a little bit more about our community grants process, and to have the members of the grant review committee come and share what their perspectives were, what their experience was, and their recommendations for moving forward. But as I said, I wanted to kind of kick things off with just a little bit of background and context about the program. Next slide. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about both how the program got started, as well as what we learned from our very first year of our grant making program, and how that information actually informed our revised approach for this new year moving forward, and some of the changes that we made as a result of that. Next slide. I wanted to start off, though, by just underscoring the city's commitment to equity, and just also want to really acknowledge and offer appreciation for the statement that the pub had at the very beginning about establishing an anti-racist space and the responsibility of members to step up and address issues as they come up. As folks I'm sure are aware, the city has expressed its commitment to equity through a variety of practices and policies and plans. This includes a resolution that was passed last summer that formally adopted the following values that are on the screen before you, including being anti-racist and advancing equity and transparency and communication and collaboration. The resolution specifically states, among other things, that employees and residents are responsible for dismantling institutional and systemic racism. It also calls on us to reimagine our political processes, and acknowledges that we at the city really gain institutional knowledge and insight and awareness whenever we conduct inclusive outreach and public engagement. And I'm very excited and humbled today to share with the pub just one of the ways the Portland Harbor program is approaching this and working to practice those values, and how the role of community really helps us to do that. And that's through our Portland Harbor Grants Initiative. Next slide. So our program launched in 2019, and our program exists because of community members. A number of communities disproportionately affected by the Portland Harbor Superfund site contamination, as well as the cleanup process, really pushed the city to do more to involve communities. And as a result of that, we wound up engaging diverse communities to identify priorities and values and to build out a public involvement framework. We engaged those groups that have been involved with the Portland Harbor cleanup as that's been moving forward, but we also work to engage the general public, as well as diverse organizations and communities that work on environmental and social justice issues who may not be directly, who are not already directly engaged with Portland Harbor processes. So these groups included those that represent and advocate for tribal communities, people who are houseless, immigrant communities, BIPOC communities, and those with current and historical connections to the Portland Harbor area. And as a result of that process, we developed these 4 programmatic goals that guide our work. And so first and foremost is the one that's at the front here about supporting meaningful involvement of those that are disproportionately impacted, and really working to increase access to information, support transparency and collaboration with other public entities and community members as well. Next slide. So last year, 2019, Council authorized $300,000 to support public involvement through fiscal year 23-24. And those funds in the very first year, our first grant year was the 2021 cycle. We did some very focused grant making and awarded $80,000 to 5 organizations. And those organizations' efforts were really focused on community involvement within the Willamette Cove remedial design process, as well as building out a plan to make information more available regarding the cleanup data, institutional control information as well. From that effort, we had a number of new collaborations that resulted and really fostered some mutual learning between organizations that previously hadn't had connections before. Next slide. We also wound up doing a number of feedback sessions with the grantees from that cycle and other community members to understand what worked well, what was challenging, and really what we could do better moving forward. What's on the slide here indicates some of the learnings that we had and some of the key takeaways from those conversations, as well as our experience of managing this program. And what we heard from grantees and from other applicants and those who desired to apply was really urging for the program to offer greater flexibility and to make revisions to our approach when possible. That's why I have this picture of a willow here in terms of like sort of offering some flexibility. And they also wanted to make sure that we're offering sufficient flexibility to the community to really honor their needs, their limitations, and to really do what we can to support them and their involvement in this effort. we also learned that it's important to lend support for navigating the existing systems that we have within the city, which can be challenging to navigate, and to see what we can do to push for some internal change when that's possible, and to really think about, why is there a policy or approach in place that we've taken? Is there something we can do to change it if that's going to benefit community? What is needed to make those changes? It was also really recommended that we simplify where we possibly can, and really recognize that this work is iterative. We have to make changes and be responsive to community as we're kind of going through it, make revisions to our plans as needed, to best achieve the goals of supporting meaningful involvement of community in this effort. So based on what we heard from community, we made several programmatic changes for our current cycle, for our FY 21-22 grant cycle. And these include revising our application process, simplifying and really shortening it, and making the information or the questions more accessible and easier to understand. We also added a conversational component to it. So applicants were also invited to have a conversation with our review panel, in addition to providing a written application. Next slide. And so the purpose of the grants this year really maintains the sort of the central point about making funds available to support meaningful involvement of communities within the cleanup process. And we had these sort of three objectives around the center circle here. We made funds available to help achieve that goal by making funds available to support BIPOC leadership in cleanup related public participation processes. So these can include existing processes related to the cleanup or specific to Willamette Cove, or to the EPA convened Portland Harbor Collaborative. We also made funds available to support capacity building, to engage in scientific, technical, and policy and process topics related to the Portland Harbor Superfund. And then the other one was really about fostering collaboration between Portland communities and the city's Portland Harbor program on Superfund related topics. We revised these objectives and flexibility to try and be as responsive as we could, and sort of offering communities to really put forward what their vision was of how they saw themselves achieving these objectives. Next slide. So we had I think these are five points of criteria, and how applications were evaluated. So we looked to see how the proposal and the proposed project aligned with what the grant funding program goals are. We also evaluated based on a clear description of what an applicant hopes to achieve and the activities they will do to achieve it. So making sure that those are clearly defined and there's a connection between the proposed activities and the goals, and that there's a demonstrated knowledge and experience with ability to do those activities. We also wanted to make sure that there was a clear demonstration of supporting leadership and meaningful involvement of BIPOC communities. So whether that was BIPOC individuals in leadership positions, or as well as centering the needs and priorities of BIPOC communities, as well as partnering with meaningful partnership with BIPOC-led groups. And then we also, wanted to make sure that what the applicant proposed and their approach and their activities would achieve the programmatic goals. Next slide. So we also revised our review process. So in year one of the program, we had reviewers who were both who were really government partners, so both internal and external to the city, but with other government agencies. And this year, we integrated many participatory grant making principals. So this means that we recruited community members to play a decision-making role in the selection process. So in addition to community members, we had agency and bureau partners with knowledge and expertise in grant making, remediation, and Portland Harbor also joined that review committee. We received 15 applications this year. They totaled about $341,000. This is a significant increase from what we received last year. We had received 7 applications totaling $152,000. So it's a pretty decent increase, about 125% from year 1 to year 2. And this year we recruited participants. The panelists that we were recruited, we prepared with an orientation, walked through roles and provided support, went through evaluation criteria and scoring rubric, so they knew what considerations, what factors should be considered as they were selecting the applicants to move on to the next round. So the panel wound up selecting 12 applicants to engage in further discussion with and invited to have a conversation with the review panel. And then from that, 9 applicants were selected to be funded based on that criteria. And the community panelists are gonna share what happened within that process, the deliberation, the discussion, and what they think, what they're putting forward for next steps for the program, and what they see as a sort of important move forward. I'm very excited to share this list of, oh, I'm sorry, next slide. This list of awardees with you all. We have 9 organizations that have been selected, and the grant period is running from the 1st of September through December 31st of 2022. The folks that are bolded, Black Educational Achievement Movement, Blueprint Foundation, and Portland Harbor Community Coalition were our repeat awardees. They were also funded last year. So I'm gonna bring my portion to a close and hand it over to the community members who really dedicated so much time, so much effort, so much thought and heart to their roles as panelists on this community grant review committee. It's been just an honor to get to work with them and to be pushed by them, and I'm really excited for you all to hear directly from them about their experience. So thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. I'll just turn it over to, I don't know, is it Selena who's reading? Or Lenny, are you leading the discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Jessica, and thank you to the board for having us. We're really excited to share a little bit about this process, and then hear back from you all too. So you can go ahead to the next slide. We're just gonna walk through what the process was like, a little bit about who we are, how we got here, what we heard, and then the conclusions and recommendations that we came to. Next slide, please. So we had a really wonderful panel, and I'm going to introduce some of the other community members here today to introduce themselves too. I'm Lenny Brown. I am a neighbor in North Portland, and spend a lot of my volunteer time connecting the BIPOC community to the outdoors in a variety of different ways. And so I was really honored to be invited to be part of this panel. Selena, do you want to introduce yourself too?
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Selena Flores. I'm a community member addressing the group today. And I am one of the co-hosts and producers of It Did Happen Here, a podcast based in Portland. I recently finished up a stint as the volunteer coordinator at KBOO Community Radio, and I'm very happy to be part of this panel.
Thanks, Selena. Lorraine?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Lorraine Wilson. I'm a community member. I'm also a board member of Resolution Northwest and also a board auntie at Brown Girls Rise. I am a former staff member of this at the City of Portland, so I have that lens of being both having worked within the system and now continuing to work within the community. And I'm not sure if Rennie is on. Yes, Rennie is on. I'll kick it over to Rennie, I suppose. Rennie?
Hi everyone. I'm Renee Begant-Penn. I'm here as a community member. I was so happy to be a part of this process. It was an excellent process. It meant a lot for me to be here, and I enjoyed it a lot. I've been a part of the community in Portland for the last 3 years. I'm also an attorney at law. So thank you for having me.
Great, thank you. So we can move to the next slide, and Selena is gonna talk a little bit about what we heard.
Thank you. So in our conversations with the communities, we heard a lot of powerful personal testimony. And some of the key themes that kind of came out of that were that we were talking with longtime community members, sometimes people who'd been part of the Portland community for generations. All of the people we talked with are doing work with communities to impact the future. Many work with children. Teaching community members to engage in governmental processes was a big theme. Kind of, you know, we've all seen maybe people standing outside City Hall and picketing. Maybe being part of the processes earlier is kind of some people's, some groups' motivations. We heard a lot about partnership and coalition building. Many of the organizations we talked with referenced each other. And in that, we heard a lot about resource sharing. Many of the groups, the funds were to be used for budgets, stipends, and volunteer support. So that's just paying people for their time. And the funds are needed to build capacity. So being able to bring in more people to help with these, the goals that are being put forth. We saw and heard so much passion for the communities that these orgs are serving, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And as I mentioned, many of the organizations are interconnected and are sharing resources. So if one org was to be funded and maybe another wasn't, there was kind of a mention of possibly sharing that award between them. And we were hearing a lot about helping community members engage with the river, sometimes for the first time, and that was pretty huge. So in our conversations, I just pulled a couple quotes from those conversations, and they're anonymized just to protect confidentiality. But when asked, are the funds you've requested sufficient? This community member, this applicant said, no, but we'll figure it out, and we'll figure out other ways to get stuff done. And this person in particular puts in very long hours, probably volunteering a lot of their time. And they work directly with the next generation of leaders. So doing very important work. When asked for concerns or items they could foresee needing support with, one applicant said, having the city honor citizens' lived experience. And then when asked about their budget, another applicant said, we should compensate people for their time. So volunteerism is great. If people can be paid, they should be paid. So I thank you for that. And I'm gonna pass it on to, I believe it is Linny.
Great, thanks, Selena. Yeah, this process was so unique because us community members, we got to be part of the panel. And the applications themselves were shorter, and we had more time for interviews that we did via Zoom. But in that way, applicants were able to tell their stories and tell stories about their projects. And what came out of that was like a richness in applications, a richness in the stories, and the conversations were not one way. It was a two-way street with really important dialogue and themes that came up. So after we did all the interviews, we sat down as a committee to attempt to divvy up the funds. And I just want to emphasize that the applicants this year were extraordinary. There were so many applications that are set up to make a meaningful impact in their communities, and especially frontline community members and BIPOC community members that are impacted by the Superfund site and cleanup. So we were trying to figure out, hey, what's the most equitable thing to do here? Do we offer more organizations funding, but give them less money than they requested? And then there came up this sort of conversation that, while we heard firsthand that so many groups were volunteering their time, energy, and resources, and we were concerned that folks were not being fairly compensated for the meaningful, impactful work in their communities. So the other option was, well, do we fund like the full request, but to fewer organizations? But sort of in response to that, we heard there's this really tight ecosystem or network of organizations, especially the BIPOC CBO organizations that work together and lean on each other for support. So after deliberation, after shared learning, we came to this conclusion that divvying up such a small amount of money was once again asking frontline communities to make do with insufficient funds. And thank you to my panel for helping me get there. We were continuing to under-resource those most impacted by the Superfund site, especially Black and Indigenous communities and other communities of color. And so as community members, we were asking ourselves, hey, are we being complicit in this system that has been and continues to be inequitable for the BIPOC community? We were invited by the city as community members, which was great. We were invited to be part of a process to advance equity, advance environmental justice. But if we went forward without raising our concerns, were we a checkbox to say that authentic community engagement had occurred without making real changes to the system that we saw was inequitable? So as the panel, we decided we could not equitably divvy up the money while also meeting goals on racial justice and on anti-racism. And if the city is committed to racial justice, repairing past harm, and funding communities of color to lead this work, as I've seen folks say even today in this conversation that they are, we need to put more money into this grant system, not only for this year, but for years to come. And I just want to end my piece to say thank you to all the community members on the panel. I learned so much from you in this process, and I also felt heard by all of you. And I'm so grateful for the perspectives that Selena, Lorraine, Renee, that you all brought to these conversations. And with that, Lorraine's going to talk a little bit about what happened next.
Thank you, Lenny and Selena, Renee, and all the other panel members. So as you've heard before, we're coming here to get your support in as we go forward, acknowledging what was said before, what we've learned from the process, and what the panel decided to act upon, right? We're requesting that more fund is needed, right? If the city is going to be asking communities to be part of the process of repairing the harm that has impacted the communities, then it needs to be adequately funded. And as Lenny said before, we really got to a point as a committee to decide, how do we divvy up this fund? Or are we going to be part of that process? And we decided no. as a committee, that we are not going to do that. We are not going to be, as Lenny said, complicit, right? Empaneling, as I said, I have also worked at the city, so I know it from both sides, and I know that there are staff members who are organizing about how we do this process better, right? And one of the ways identifies having diverse panels. However, I always say, as we move to a more equitable space, as we center equity in the city, as we acknowledge anti-racism, we have to keep moving to doing better. So you always hear best practices. We don't subscribe to best practices because best practices fool us into thinking that we have arrived, and we have not arrived. So having a diverse panel was one step in getting to a more equitable space. However, that this diverse panel was now put in a position to basically do something that was inequitable to the community. We weren't centering the community. And as a result of that, it's like, nope, we are not going to ask you all to continue to do with less. Hearing from the community also impacted us, right? And hearing the fact that there are one person who is doing everything because they didn't see that they had a choice but to do everything if change was going to happen within her community. We also identified, based on the proposals that we got, that what educating BIPOC community entails is much more, because they have been kept out of the process. They have been kept out of the process. So in order for us to resource the communities that we are asking to work with the city, we have to ensure that we fund them adequately. And funding them adequately means, and we can go on to the next slide, requesting the council, as we see there, to authorize at least 500. And I want to clarify why we say at least 500. This number we came up with was based on us as a committee looking at the information and the requests that we had and seeing how it is growing, that it is at least 500K. However, on reflection as a committee, because we are not perfect, we also recognize that this number that we came up with did not have input from the community. So this is why we are saying at least 500, right? So we are seeking the pub support in at least 500, but however, we want to clearly state that we need to consult with communities and grantees for how much they need. This is the most important part, that we need to consult with communities and grantees for how much they need. And once we do that, I think we would come up with a number that would sufficiently fund what we are asking the community to do, that we will pay the community and we will stop relying on them to keep giving and giving of what little they have. So today, I just want to reiterate that we calling on the Public Utilities Board to support us in this effort, in where we have identified deficiencies in what you are asking individuals of the committees, of the community to do, in supporting us as we advocate for our communities to be adequately funded to support the education of BIPOC communities on the impact of the Superfund on the pollution in the rivers, and that they will be fully educated on water safety and all the other things that come along with being part of that process. So thank you all.
So are you guys, I just want to make sure I'm not interrupting. Okay. Okay, so just being conscious of time, I know we have about 4 minutes for our board members to ask Karen Williams.
Thank you, Kaliska. Thank you, Kaliska, for the recognition. And thank you so much, Linny, Selena, Lorraine, and Renee, for your service and presenting this information to the board. I am ready to make a motion for PUB to support the request that the community member panel has brought to us. But Kaliska, I want to make sure that you're ready for that motion to be put on the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a few minutes here for people to ask questions. If they have follow-up questions to the presentation they wanted to ask, either I think Jessica or the panel themselves. So you guys a chance to ask any follow-up questions in regards to their presentation. I guess my question would be, once you guys award the grants, is there sort of a follow-up that you do with the grantees for any sort of reporting, or, you know, like what do the funds make a difference? Just kind of what is your guys' touch point for that?
Yeah, I can take that one. So we do, I'm in touch with the grantees throughout the grant year, and then also do interviews with them following the conclusion of the grant cycle, to make sure that we're capturing all of that information. And also trying to recognizing that reporting can be quite burdensome. So we're trying to remove some of that administrative burden. And so where we can collect that information through conversation and through phone calls, we're looking to do that. And then, but also we don't wait until the end of the cycle to assess where folks are at, and really reaching out and staying in touch with folks throughout the process to see if they need any support, how they're doing with their progressing on what they've put forward, and that type of thing.
Thanks for that, Jessica. Anyone else? Looking for hands. Sarah.
Yeah, hi everyone. Sarah Messier, she, her from the Portland Water Bureau. And I just want to share my input as Water Bureau staff that I run a grant program about lead education in the community. And one challenge that I've had with my program with regards to funding is that when you set a number at the outset of the grant program for funding, it sort of stays that way into perpetuity. So I would also recommend that any funding number you put out there, you also attach opportunities to increase that number annually to at least stay with inflation, because it's really easy for government to say, in 2000, we're going to spend, $300K, and now 20 years later, we're still spending that same amount. So that I would just want to put that out there, so that communities are appropriately funded as inflation, continues to grow.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Anyone else? Follow-up questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. I think Karen Williams, if you want to put the motion into effect.
Be happy to. So I move that the Portland Utility Board support the Portland Harbor Community Grant Panel's recommendation to City Council to amend the subject ordinance and authorize at least $500,000 over the next 3 years, contingent on community input and with opportunities to increase that amount for inflation and other economic conditions.
All right, thanks, Karen. And then, sorry, Amy, Eliza, do we have to have somebody that seconds it, or do we just vote from here?
You want a second, and then you want to open up for discussion, then public comment, and then the vote.
Okay. So I guess I can second it. I'll second the motion. And then if there's any discussion, Karen Williams, go ahead.
Thank you, Kaliska. And I would like to just speak to the motion. I recommend that this program, the grant program, that we all, the pub, the Bureau, the city, view this program as on the same scale and assigning the same weight and importance as any other Portland Harbor cleanup program. And I would invite us all, and the Bureau in particular, to think about the compensation and awards and amounts of funding that are commonly assigned to the value of consulting services, to professional, and I put that in quotes, I guess, time and expertise. And what I have heard and believe is that the expertise and the service and the time and the labor that this program again is asking of community members should be valued on that same scale. And I would also encourage us all to view the community grant program as on the scale of the Portland Harbor cleanup itself and the scale of the damage that's been done, both environmentally and to the community. And those scales are enormous, and this grant program should be viewed in the same context and scale as the rest of the Portland Harbor cleanup program. So for those reasons, I made that motion and am speaking in favor of it.
Thank you for that, Karen. Any other discussion from board members? Okay, seeing none. Any public comment? Not seeing any hands raised. Okay, I guess we will put it to a vote. So I'll go first, I guess, since I'm number one. Kaliska Day, co-chair, voting member. I vote yes on the motion.
Karen Williams, co-chair and voting member. I vote yes.
Alex Lopez, voting member. I am abstaining from this vote.
Looks like Robin.
Yeah, sorry, I thought I was number 5. This is Robin Castro, voting member. I vote yes.
Karen Spencer, voting member. I vote yes.
Julia DeGraw, also voting member, and I vote yes.
Perfect. So it passes unanimously with 1 abstention. So thank you guys so much for this presentation. I just want to acknowledge all the work that you've done. I've participated in a lot of committees and panel reviews, and it's very time consuming. So thank you for being a part of this and being an advocate for it, really. I am excited to see where this goes, and kind of to echo what Karen Williams said, I do think it is something that should be on par just with the Queen itself. You know, things affect communities in big ways, and we should take that seriously as public agencies and put the same weight against it for community. Okay, with that, we're going to move on. So we are going to talk about the City African American Network Report. CAN report for short, for those who have heard that acronym being kind of tossed around in discussion to this. So I'm hoping that you guys all had a chance to take a look at this report. If you haven't, I recommend that you're able to bring it up now as we kind of throw this out for discussion, just to kind of put a little bit of history behind it. Obviously, this is something that has been in the works. It is, Eliza, correct me if I'm getting details wrong, but this is a group of volunteers that put this report together and have put all this data together. So this isn't anybody's full-time job. This isn't anybody that's being paid to do this. This is theirs. That was a, I guess you would call passion project or something, point of interest, which I think has been very impactful if you guys have all had a chance to look at it. And the reason that we kind of want to look at this as it is we wanted to sort of see it from the source and be able to talk about it as a board, just kind of initial reactions, and then talk about, I know that we've brought up the environment of employment at Bureau offices for BIPOC staff and retention of staff. And I think this kind of follows on into that subject. So I know that's something that we've talked about in our work plan and has been a topic of discussion. And so I think this kind of obviously marries to that very well. And we're just going to kind of throw ideas, just how are you guys receiving this? What are we thinking? This isn't supposed to be anything like really formal. This is kind of a conversation about it. Just like, where do we see this going? How do we want to interact with this? You know, I know the bureaus have received this as well, and that they are taking, I'm not sure, I don't want to say action on it, Eliza. I think they are taking it and processing it as well, and are going to decide kind of how to answer back to this, or how to, I think, handle the information. So with that being said, I don't know if there's anybody who kind of wants to chime in. Just, again, this is just a conversation about the report itself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ariel, and I'm a current member on the pub and also helped write the Black Workforce Report. And I believe a couple other people are here from CAN as well. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review the report.
hey, we need to talk about this. Let's sit down and have a discussion. I just want to know like what's happened since then.
So pretty much what's happened since then is that we have been in discussion with directors, bureauship leaders, and also engaged some city council members in regards to the workforce report.
Okay. And have they made sort of a, hey, we need to really look at this, internalize it, and then figure out how we can do better? Or is that just sort of where we're at in the discussions?
It's kind of where we're at in the discussions. It's a little bit of both, but still trying to figure that out.
Okay, great. I think Marvin, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marvin Dean. I sit with Ariel and a couple others on the CAN leadership and co-author of the report that was put out. And yes, some strides have been made. We also, I wouldn't say we had any setbacks, but we are, I would say, more tire spinning in the same place. Like once we reached a certain point, it seems as if momentum isn't as much as it was in the beginning when the first like people were reacting to the report. I think other things have come up, and this is a concern for me that as always, and I think we stated somewhere in either the report or letters that we have sent out, where you know, there's always going to be something else that seems more important in terms of what energies and resources are put towards. And we can look at the report, and I don't know who all has had some opportunity to look at the report, but you can just see the numbers in the data, the number of Black employees. And I know that we had a loss of employees overall, but if we look at the percentages, and you can see the number of Black people and how that they're disproportionately affected, I think it's going to be even more concerning as we go forward here with the new mandates that are coming out, because of those numbers going to disproportionately affect people of color as well. And we're going to see the 456 employees from 2021 dwindle down to even less. So to me, it's really concerning that we haven't had more emphasis on this, and that, you know, we're reached a point where we're not making any progress, and that, you know, moving forward, we're not embracing these numbers and how they're going to look in another, you know, 2 to 3 months from now when these mandates take full effect. So I just want to put that on people's radar.
Thanks, Marvin. And just for clarification, I don't know if everybody's familiar, if you want to just quickly speak to the mandates that you're referencing.
Yes, the, sorry, and I got to remember audience here, so thank you for that. The city's vaccine mandates around vaccination. And, you know, we've had an opportunity to meet with the human resources and various other people that were writing the vaccine policies going forward. But a couple of times the questions were brought up about if they had an idea of the number of people who would possibly be removed from their employment for not complying with the mandate. And the answer was that they're extrapolating numbers from Oregon Health Authority, and those numbers that they were using at that time said about approximately 52% of people of color are not currently vaccinated. So if we extrapolate that number and bring it into where we're at, that means, you know, potentially half of the number of Black people are potentially not going to be employed here after October 18th is the deadline for those to comply with the mandate.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Julia.
Sorry, took me a second to unmute myself. he just covered a number of the points that I was going to make. I was looking at the recommendations here, because, well, first of all, it's very concerning to see how disproportionately Black employees, the number dropped over the last 3 years. And the city should really be, I would hope, more proactive in addressing that in a really serious way. And I'm looking at these recommendations, and I'm wondering, are there any departments that are doing any of those recommendations? Do we have like any data within the city of like some departments that are maybe doing this better than others? Are they just kind of across the board not doing blind, resume reviews and like simple things like that like help level the playing field? Or do we know that across the board that this isn't happening, or is there some piecemeal amount of this work going on that might give us some data points?
See, a couple other people jumped on, Layla and Jarrell, so I don't know if either of them or Ariel would like to answer any of those questions, but want to give them opportunity if they would like.
Sorry, I hopped on late, so I'm just kind of catching up with where everyone is at right now.
Yeah, sorry, we were just kind of talking about this, the CAN report, and just kind of where the city is sitting with this. Julia just asked, are there departments who have actively tried to integrate a program or trying to make better strides towards retention? I think we're just looking at where as agencies, if there's been any sort of movements, and then
well, yeah, and I specifically was looking at the recommendations that were in the report, and I'm just wondering if any of the departments have, are in a piecemeal way doing any of those recommendations. Like, is some department doing like blind resume reviews, things like that? And then I have a follow-up question, which is the best we can do just make a stern recommendation to the city council that they need to adopt these practices? I want to know how much power we have to try to get the city to take action on this, because it's really disturbing to see them not responding urgently to this clear problem.
I think I can answer maybe one or two of those in part, if I can remember all of them. So basically, we're a small group, right? We're volunteer run, so we don't have entire capacity to answer that question in detail. I will say that we have one hell of a spreadsheet going in the accountability that we've attempted to push forward with different departments. We have split that work up and tried to push that forward best we can, having individual meetings with commissioners and equity practitioners and bureau heads to move the pieces where we can. Some folks were excited about the report and were like, yes, this gives us fuel to push the work that we've been trying to do. Please help us, let's sit down immediately. And some folks are scared. There's some folks are still clutching their pearls, and we know that the city as a whole is very reactionary, and folks are afraid of messing up, and rightly so, right? Like, it's okay to be apprehensive. But yeah, so like, to answer your question, yes and no. Some folks are on it, some folks are not. I think everyone needs help in their journey, right? But really what we're really looking for is like initiative, right? Is like, there are problems that we know have existed for a long time, that folks have just not been listened to about. So we're really here to, like, not just offer an olive branch, but to like get our hands dirty and actually like do the thing. I hope that answers, at least in part, some of what you were asking.
Oh, that was super helpful. Thank you.
I just want to add to that, what Layla just shared as well, is that, we did have the opportunity to meet with a lot of directors and the commissioners, the mayor. And, at this juncture, I'm just realizing, or I should say I have realized, but it's solidifying my belief in the failure of leadership. And it's just, is eye-opening to see the city put out statements around core values and then just totally abandon those core values. And I don't think, people realize the power of words, and for them to just be stating things just for lip service, it's just it's like a hamster wheel. It's like over and over and over. Like, how many times can these things happen in different faces and different wording and different capacities, but it's still the same thing. It's failure from the top. It's like you're putting out a core value of failure, not putting out a core value that we can get behind, that people really want to stand up, because from the top, you're showing failure. And it's just rolling downhill, just gains momentum. And I think until policies are in place that affect how we operate, and it doesn't matter who the leader is, things are going to continue to be the same.
Yeah, thanks for that input, both Layla and Marvin. I just wanted to give a quick moment. I don't know if anybody from the bureaus are on, if they want to comment to anything that they've heard, or if they want to give any sort of.
This is Eliza, and I was going to chime in and just remind folks that this was actually an opportunity for the bureaus not to comment.
Okay.
Yeah. So opportunity for this to sort of be presented to the board with those who crafted it, having a chance to speak for themselves and not dealing with responses from the bureaus.
Okay. Thanks for that reminder, Eliza. Lorraine.
Thank you. I am a stayover from the previous presentation. As I mentioned when I was doing my introduction, I was a former employee at the city. So I'm here as a community member making a comment, but also as a former employee and a former member of the CAN leadership team who did this work over the last year and a half to get us to where we are today. And I haven't been with the city since May, so I know I want to acknowledge my CAN leadership brothers and people on the CAN leadership team, on the work that you all continue to do as you advocate for yourselves and your fellow Black employees. So just to give a little background, this all started last year, as you all remembered, in the middle of COVID, right? The report, if you all read the report, when COVID came along, we all had to leave and go home. And one of the challenges, one of the things we wanted to find out was what kind of support Black staff was getting to make that transition. And we sent out a survey. And as a result of that survey, we realized that Black staff were not being supported as we were hearing those anecdotes of how white staff was being supported. Oh yeah, I got my desk, I got my chair, I got my monitor and all these kinds of things. And then also that Black staff were being overly supervised. They were being checked in on disproportionately than other staff. So we were seeing in a COVID environment where the inequities were showing up on how Black staff experience at the city was highlighted again, right? And as a result of that, we decided, the city made a bold statement of being acknowledging anti-Blackness and centering equity and acknowledging that it's going to be anti-racist going forward. And as a result of that, CAN leadership decided, okay, great, this is a great statement. We're going to hold the city to that. We're going to hold leadership to that. And as a result of that, we engaged with bureau directors, asking them a simple question. What are you doing to support your Black staff? Based on the city's commitment to acknowledge anti-Blackness, to be anti-racist, and to center equity. We got a very limited response from bureau directors. And as Leila said, we created a spreadsheet to track the things that they were saying, because we are not asking you to do anything. We are asking you what you want to do. And based on what you say you want to do, we're going to hold you accountable. All right. We met with the commissioners, and the few bureau directors that we met with, they said, well, you know, we are not being held to these requirements. So we met with the commissioners and say, hey, how are you holding your bureau leadership to these requirements? And as a result of those meetings, we saw more bureau directors reaching out to have meetings with us, to have that conversation, what they're doing to support their Black staff. Right, and as Leila mentioned and everyone else mentioned, it was a volunteer. Everybody has a job. Everybody had a job. So we were doing it on the side. And as a result of that, moving forward, we engaged, we met with different bureau directors, we collected the information, and we're tracking this stuff, right? We made a presentation. I think this is getting into the time when I was rolling out of the city, right? But I just wanted to share that information, that the data, when you come to talking about data, the staff at the city of Portland do not have access to data. BHR has the data. BHR refused to provide the data, and they continue to refuse to provide the data. So if you all want data, you go ask BHR for them. We don't have the staff at the time when I was employed, don't have the authority to get that data, right? And when we posted the report with the data, we got a lot of blowback, right? Because people were challenging the data, where you all got this data, what this data is about. And what we said is that we use the data that was available to us. So going forward, I suppose, I don't know what you all are here. I'm going to throw it back on to the CAN leadership, but I just wanted to share that with you all and to say that this is systemic and it's across the city. There is no bureau that is doing it better than any other bureau. Because if you look at the data that's available, that we have available, it will show that we continue to use Black staff, that Black staff are continued to be over-investigated, right? One of the former bureau directors of BHR said that when they came into the city and they looked at their number, the percentage of staff who was being investigated, even though Black staff was on the lower end, they made up 40% of the investigations. That's concerning. Right? If that alone is not concerning, then I don't know what else is concerning. And again, we saw that reflected when we did the survey last year, that for some reason, Black staff are over-supervised. So here we're dealing into that anti-Blackness. We're talking about anti-Blackness and what kind of extra lenses put on Black staff, Black people. It's reflected in the community, it's reflected in our job. And I think I should just shut up because I can go on because I'm very passionate about this, but thanks for the opportunity.
No, thank you, Lorraine, for that insight. It's very, it's great to hear from a personal perspective and somebody who can speak to that. So I thank you for your candidness and your willingness to share that with the group. Julia wanted to.
I realize I already spoke. I apologize for taking up so much space, but I also just, after hearing more of this, I find it's just really concerning isn't even a strong enough word, that where that there's a lack of data, B, that the people that are doing the work to try to bring this information to the surface for the city to do something about it are unpaid, and a group of folks that are expected to work with a lack of data, and then are not respected when they come forward with this information because they were working kind of like with their hand tied behind their back and without resources or compensation. So anyway, there's so many problems with this entire process. And I want to express like deep gratitude for this work that has been done. It is more than a labor of love. But I'm like, I'm having trouble like expressing myself clearly and my voice is kind of shaking, but like, I just don't, I would like for us as an entity to express to this city that this is not an adequate response to such a huge problem, and that we have to do better in very concrete ways. And I'm not quite sure what that response is, but I just want to put that out there that I would support us, the pub, trying to make it clear to the city that this is not an adequate amount of resources to address such a huge problem, and that it's actually upholding the inequitable systemic issues, the way that folks who are trying to bring this to light are being treated, and the resources they're given to do the work. I guess I'll stop there, but I'm just, yeah.
No, thank you for that, Julia. I think I'm not going to speak for everybody, but it is a very, disheartening. I think it hurts almost to know that this exists out there for people. And I think just sort of Lorraine's testimony to it, just having experienced things that are similar for other circumstantial reasons, it's hard to digest. So I don't want to put anybody from CAN on the spot, but this is, I think, just something to think about. I would love to know, Julie, I agree. I think we should, I would support us as a board making some sort of statement or acknowledgement. I think Karen Spencer has something along those lines. So I'm going to turn that over to her in just a second, but this is just for the folks from CAN. Thank you for joining us. The one thing I would ask, and you don't have to answer this now, is just let us know, what kind of support, if there's an ask you guys want from us, if there's something that you guys can see that we can help support and being an advocate and helping to push accountability through to the city. I think this is something, again, I know that you guys are going to, are in these continuing discussions, so I'd love it if we could still continue to be a part of that. I know you're stretched thin, you're volunteers, so I just want to be conscious. So with that said, if there's just want to make another space for any more comments within the board members before I turn it over to Karen Spencer, because I think what she has tails along with this very nicely. And not seeing any other hands or anything. Karen Spencer, do you want to go ahead and kind of bring forward what you wanted to talk about? Because I think this segues in very well.
I apologize for not putting the video on today. It's a crazy day and my background is awful. So I apologize for that. I do want to thank CAN for their presentation today. I want to thank them for carrying the water for others. I know what it's like to trailblaze in your community, in your job, and to have to do your job with the impediments that you have while trying to carry the water for other people to help lift the burden for others in the future. And I appreciate the efforts that you have done. I heard very clearly and read in your report, the need for role models, the need for, having even a peer group or mentorship, and having an environment that fosters mental health and well-being that strives towards your success and really the success of the city overall. If we're going to harness the power of diversity, we have got to overcome the blockages to that empowerment. So I wanted to say that. Now to get to the the project piece of things. Last time I wrote a letter, and certainly it outlined a lot of the issues that I faced and that I was suspecting that employees at the bureaus might be facing, and in the context of the remote work. And after thinking more about it, I do feel like addressing the remote workers, understanding that will actually help us identify even better the scope of the problem. We know that the problem is awful based on the CAN report, and I think it can help us identify more specifically how awful it is in some ways. So Teresa and I met, and given the board's concerns about just bandwidth and also the need for speed in addressing this issue, we are in a traumatic pandemic, and as these employees identified, there's a lot of trauma in the work environment as well, and we just don't need to be adding to it. So given the need for speed, given the need to make sure that we've got sufficient bandwidth with the pub, our proposal is, instead of doing a subcommittee as I had originally proposed, is that Teresa and I become a project team, and that we work on this project and then present it to the board. So that's the first part of the proposal. And then the second piece of that is that as an early step, that the board recommend to the bureaus to collect the qualitative, demographic, and other relevant data that the CAN employees have been seeking and haven't been able to get. So to collect that kind of data so that we can understand the potential disparate impacts on BIPAC employees. Eliza put the note in the email that she sent around. So that is, I think, as clear a statement of what the proposal is. If you want to put that in the chat, Amy or Eliza, I think that might be helpful to refresh people on it. I'm happy to take questions. Happy to address any issues people might have or concerns they might have with doing a two-person team as opposed to a full subcommittee.
Thank you so much, Karen. Go ahead, Karen Williams.
Kaliska, and thank you, Karen White Spencer, for presenting us with the work done already in putting, and to Teresa as well. I know Teresa's not here, and putting thoughts together on this. I do have a couple questions. And the first is around the project team, and hearing your strong recommendation on urgency and speed of just acting and making progress. Let's see. I guess so. Really comment and concern more than question on this aspect is that I would be concerned if that was not a public process. So even if our group, whether we call them a team or whether we call them a subcommittee, has only 2 members, recognizing that while public process wouldn't be required for meetings of the project team, I guess I would still recommend that they be public meetings, open to the public. And I say that because I think transparency and just total openness of data, of questions asked, of concerns, it just seems like that should still be a public, viewable, accessible process. My question, sorry, that was a lot of blather there, but my question, Karen, is how do you envision, let's say the project team gathering, let's say your proposal says, help, I'm sorry, Pub believes this work will help employees. Project, oh, okay, so the project team will gather data, determine the scope of the issue, and develop an issue statement. So how did you envision the team members doing that? Will you be relying on Pub staff to help with that? You know, how would you access that information that, say, the CAN employees couldn't get? How do you envision that data collection happening?
So I'm hoping we can get it by mere request, but we may have to do whatever the city equivalent of a FOIA request is. So a Freedom of Information Act request. We want to do it for the city of Portland and also for data in Seattle as well. So we would gather that data, try to make some sense of it, and then report back to the full Pub. And I should say we're not trying to do this in darkness at all. It was more of a sense of, do we really need 3 people to ask for one piece of information, and can we get that quicker doing that? So the Pub would be fully informed about what we're doing, and we can also, because I suspect it may take some while to get it, be sure to give periodic updates of what's happening and how it's moving forward. So, but crafting the information request may take a little bit of time and a little bit of back and forth. And that's why we were thinking that it would be a little faster to have a project team, because it's easier for us to get on the phone and then deliver, oh, this is what we think the request ought to be, rather than having, a week or 2 weeks because of meeting notice requirements go through to try to hash out one request. That the purpose of the project team is not to make any decisions. It's really to gather stuff for the full board.
Karen, this is Amy. If I can just also interject, one of the questions that Karen Williams asked was about Pub staff support. And so I just wanted to step in and affirm that absolutely Pub staff would be supporting both the project team, helping with the gathering of data and the analysis that's needed. So it certainly would be something that we would be working with them on.
All right. Thanks for those answers. Layla?
Yeah, just quick question. I'm wondering if y'all are working with the new data equity person at OEHR, Wally Brown.
Pub staff are connected with Wally Brown. So the Pub as a board has not engaged directly, but our staff have begun forming a relationship and connecting on some of that work.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just asking because, something I feel like I'm running into again and again and again in every bucket of my work is that folks want to create a process for a process for a process where we can probably cut some slack and take more direct action to push things forward. So yeah, I'm just in the interest of, again, repeating what someone else had said earlier, like knowing what information we already have that we can act on. Because I'm honestly just thinking as, a Black employee with a disability, when I see all of these processes, I see, my time is limited and valuable because, I don't know how long I'm going to be here. So when I see all of these processes pushing out, arguing over moving towards this hybrid model and making these large decisions, I'm just like, wow. I might die before these decisions are made and we decide that it's okay for me to still be able to work at home, So yeah, I'm just thinking in the interest of making sure that, throughout all of our processes, we're looking at where we can both, meet the standards of transparency and accountability and also cull what's unnecessary.
This is Eliza's Pub staff and I can't raise my hand. So that's why I'm just speaking briefly too, because I feel like Really good questions and comments coming. And I also wanted to share, I believe, and Karen Spencer, correct me if I have it wrong, that when you and Teresa were thinking about gathering data, it was actually not gathering new data, it was actually making an ask of existing data. And then your recommendation is to the bureaus to, when they're talking about reentry, to consider these issues.
Exactly. That is exactly correct. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Eliza, I believe that there are summaries of the project team meetings. Is that correct? If we meet with you as staff?
That is absolutely true. All those, they stay as a more simple Word document, but they exist. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then Carol Cushman.
Sorry. Yes, I just wanted to weigh in as somebody that is a supporter of transparency, and we argue with, as far as League of Women Voters is concerned, for transparency often. I understand the urgency that Karen Spencer is expressing. I also know that public process tends to be messy, but you are a public board. I can certainly see doing some investigation and some gathering of information outside of public process as sort of getting your ducks in a row so you are ready to do something. But I think it might be well to form a subcommittee like Karen Williams has suggested, in the fact of keeping this open to the public as you are going along. The public is, I know it slows things down at times, but do not consider the public an impediment to trying to get something accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. And this is simply for the data gathering and collection part and trying to make some sense of it, not to make any decisions or recommendations or anything like that. That is not the purpose of the project team.
Okay, I was thinking you were probably going to get to a recommendation part before it came back to the full pub. And so to me, if you're going through a recommendation process, I really think you need to form a subcommittee.
Okay. What if maybe recommendation is not the right word? What if, I'm going to use the word suggestions. What if we gather the data and our suggestion is we need to get more data? Would you want that to be in the subcommittee?
No, I am just thinking of the very tight schedule the pub has given itself as it has moved to Zoom with the 2 shorter meetings, that this is going to take more discussion and deliberation than probably the pub as a whole is willing to put into it. And because of so many other things on their agenda, not because they aren't willing to put time into this, but the things on their agenda that need to be done in those few hours they have each month, that I would think once you have gathered information, you really want a subcommittee so that you can discuss it, so you can bring a recommendation to the pub as a whole. And therefore, I think it needs to, that whole discussion part needs to be open. And I don't think the pub is going to have time to have the discussion you need to have, if I'm saying that correctly.
I understand you. So I am perfectly open, and maybe what I should do is modify the proposals then, and I'm just going to ask Amy and Eliza if this is the proper mechanism to do it. I would be comfortable having a project team to gather the data, and then having a subcommittee for the analysis and recommendations to the full board. I think that would be a workable process.
And if I may continue making comment here, since I got recognized first. Public notice ends up being part of what makes this so cumbersome. Once you have a sense that you have information coming, you could send out that public notice before you were actually ready for the meeting by looking ahead and saying, okay, I trust we're going to have that information by X date. And you know, set it while you're waiting to get things for discussion. Thanks. And now I'll mute myself again.
This is Eliza, and I want to acknowledge that because our meetings run over, we have now lost quorum. So,
okay, so I mean, we can't put a vote then if we've lost quorum. So, I think we're just gonna, sorry, Karen, we're gonna have to push off the vote unless Eliza, well, we can't do it over email, right?
We can't do it over email. No, this is one of the reasons I think the public meeting law is highly unfair and unrestrictive to volunteer boards, but that's my city staff public opinion. Yes, no, I think I will propose that the best way forward is that we take a quick vote at the October 5th meeting. I feel like the board actually already endorsed Karen and Teresa to sort of work up the proposal. And so I feel like your pub staff can probably continue to think about the, and talk to Karen and Spencer and think about a little bit of what will expedite the process and what data asks really need to get met based on the decision you all made at the last meeting. Does that seem right to you, Amy?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that we can still continue to do some of the logistical work in order to prepare for something to come forward to the board for a broader decision and or subcommittee formation. I think by early October, we'll have a better sense of the timing of that too.
Okay, Karen Williams.
Thanks, Kaliska, and recognizing that we've lost quorum and we can't make a decision. Eliza, can we as pub still make requests for information, requests for information and data from the bureaus through you? Can we still ask you to collect information?
As individual board members, you can certainly make an ask. I would also just say that you have bureau staff on this call listening to this conversation. And so the likelihood is that they are seeing this as coming down the pike, if that's what I would say, right? Like that you're not actually hearing any disagreement from the board that this is an important thing for the board to work on. You're hearing questions about logistics. And so if I was bureau leadership, I would say, oh, I'm going to be getting this ask. I'm probably going to be getting this recommendation.
Yeah, and if I may, and through the chair, if I may ask Karen Spencer, I mean, Karen, do you have based on the conferring that you and Teresa have already done and the thought you put into this, do you have any particular information that a request for particular information that you would like to put out there right now so that we can, you know, get started on the process and respond to the urgency that you that I agree is important to consider.
And thank you for that, Karen. We do not, we felt like just getting the proposal done in the time we were able to meet was like doing pretty well, but that should be coming, I think, fairly quickly. And we can proceed ahead based on the prior approval from the board with that activity, and then we'll just wait till October 5th for more confirmation about what the exact structure is going to be. But we'll keep moving. We'll keep chugging ahead.
And respectfully, Karen especially, I mean, would you have an objection to me asking for some information that I think would be important to this conversation?
Blast away, go for it.
Okay. Thank you. So I would like to, through Eliza and Amy, ask for information available on any exit interviews available. And I don't mean, let's see, respecting the privacy and confidentiality of exit interviews, but I would like to know how about this? Does the city do exit interviews with staff who are leaving? And how what is the extent of that in terms of a data set? And then is there any facility for that information to be shared with any confidentially, perhaps in aggregate, perhaps in summation? So I'd like to know that before when have some information about that when we can reconvene on October 5th. I'd like to know if there are employee satisfaction surveys or employee surveys out there, how frequently they, if so, what's the most recent survey data that's available? And let's see. I'd like to know if the city has manager reviews, like do city staff, is there a survey available where city staff can evaluate the performance of their managers? And that's it. So those I'd like to have information about those 3 items when we reconvene on October 5th. Does that make enough sense, Eliza and Amy?
Yep, I completely understand your request. We'll see what we can do.
Okay, thank you.
And I know we're over, so just Julia, really quick, I just want to.
Yeah, no, we're super over. I just wanted to say real quick that if we end up having to do a public records request, those also usually cost a lot of money and take a lot of time. Is that something that would have to gain approval at a board meeting, or would we be able to just proceed with that if that's a requirement for the data that we're seeking?
The board would sign off on the data, and then your pub staff would work if we had to do a FOIA.
Cool.
You would need to be involved as a board.
Okay, seeing no more hands, no more, I think we'll just kind of reconvene on this on October 5th. And I think Karen, Spencer, and Teresa will probably have a little better information. So just want to kind of close this out. Yeah, so I just don't think that I don't want to take any more time. I know I have 10 minutes to get to another meeting, so I just want to be conscious of everybody's time here.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaliska. We'll see you all on October 5th then.
All right, thank you everybody for attending and participating.
Just a reminder to stop